Today, I want to spend a little time with you describing and explaining the concept of demonstrated interest. If you are the parent of a teen who is going through the college search process, you may have heard this term. It may have come up whether in conversation just with your student, or you may have even heard it on some college visits if you've already done those. Some of you may be going, what does this even mean? Who am I demonstrating my interest to in this scenario? So let me first give you the basic definition of it. Demonstrated interest is a term that I don't even know how long it's been around at this point, but it came about from the idea that colleges are looking to try to gauge how interested a student might actually be in attending. So, in other words, just because they file an application doesn't necessarily mean they are absolutely interested in attending that school. And I think when this started, it became clear to colleges like we are capturing a certain number of incoming applications, but that doesn't mean those students are necessarily enrolling with us. And so as it becomes more and more difficult for colleges to really manage their enrollment and try to understand what their numbers are going to look like from year to year, this concept was sort of born out of that, in terms of we need to figure out some better ways to try to understand, out of the students who apply, who are the ones who are actually the most likely to enroll. So that's the broad overview, really. In terms of who uses demonstrated interest, let me give you a very generalized distinction here. In general, more smaller to mid-size, typically private institutions, are going to be tracking demonstrated interest. Not necessarily the highly selectives. Think about it more again in terms of the schools who are trying to figure out who's going to enroll if we offer them a spot here. Larger public universities use it far less frequently. However, I have an anecdote that I'll share about why that is still maybe an important factor to consider in this process. So that's who's kind of using it. So how do you then demonstrate this interest? Well, there are lots of ways. Maybe the most obvious is actually going in person for a visit and taking a tour and being sure that you've actually registered, the student has registered to be there so that there's a record that they came and did the official tour and spent time on campus. Clearly, making that effort demonstrates a level of commitment and at least curiosity. And whether or not you stay interested after the visit is really up to the student and how the visit goes, I suppose. But in terms of just checking that box, certainly an on-campus visit is a very concrete way of doing that. Other ways are if college reps are visiting the high school and the student makes an effort to get to that meeting, check in with the college rep, maybe have a conversation depending on how fluid and optional, how open it is in terms of being able to do that one-on-one at least. But again, making sure that they've registered, there's some kind of record that they came to the school visit. So that helps, again, demonstrating that they're taking time out of their schedule to make that connection and to gain more information about the school. The other thing is, quite frankly, is opening messages and emails that come from the schools. So even in the application phase, students are often getting a lot of mail. Nowadays, more of it is electronic than it used to be. There used to be bags and bags of flyers coming from colleges to most high school students, especially junior and seniors' homes. But now more of it is electronic. But simply opening emails and clicking on links that are there, or responding if there's an actual question that is being asked of you. Those are other ways to demonstrate interest. Now, if getting there in person is absolutely not going to happen for a student, and it's a place where if I'm working with them, I'm pretty sure they need to be demonstrating their interest, we will talk about how you can craft an email directly to the rep who's responsible for reading applications for your area. And that's another way of making that connection, demonstrating the interest, specifically stating, I'm not going to be able to make it to a visit prior to submitting my application, or maybe not at all. So you are at least then trying to make that connection and let the college know that you do have actual interest. You just can't physically get there to do the tour. So those are generally speaking, ways that that can work. I guess one other thing before I forget is if a college comes to your hometown and offers like an evening presentation where parents and students are invited to hear the information overview, attending that is another way. Your name is usually added, not usually, is added to a list that you attended, and so that is another way of, again, demonstrating that interest when it comes to colleges. In terms of the anecdote I was going to share about large schools. So, several years ago, when I still worked as a school based counselor, we had a student who applied to a large public university in the state of Florida. And there was actually some trouble with applications, or not applications, with his supporting materials, getting the transcript filed on time, some other things, and then actually he missed a message or something at some point from the college rep. And so things were kind of going sideways. He realized he had missed a couple of steps, and so he wanted to make sure that he could somehow try to make it up. So he, with the help of his counselor, reached out to the school and to the rep who was in charge of our area, and because she had records of the fact that he visited her during the school visit. He had emailed her about something else along the way. She went out of her way to make sure that his file was actually taken care of and marked as complete so that he could get a decision, and he was eventually actually admitted to the university. So while that is not a traditional example of demonstrated interest, meaning it wasn't playing a role in them saying yes or no per se, it was helpful that he had made those personal connections, and it gave the rep more impetus to really help him in the process. So thinking of it just in terms of reciprocity, reaching out, making connections, and thinking about how that may pay off in the long run is definitely part of the process. If you have questions about it, as always, send us a message. We'd love to help you better understand the crazy nuances that are part of the college process. And until then, take care.